So I've been a pretty big fan of the Borderlands franchise for a while. I've sunk countless hours into 2, 3, and Wonderlands, but for some reason I have only ever done a single playthrough of the first game, and to be honest, I barely remember anything about it. So I kind of wanted to go back and give the game an honest shot, really try to dive deep into what the game has to offer, give my thoughts and how it feels, how it's aged, and if I think it's worth playing after all these years. So I decided to just jump right in. I locked in Mordecai because I've never really used snipers much in the Borderlands games and wanted to try it out and try to make a build focused on it, and it seemed fun, so I just dove right in. So I think the most important thing to talk about when going back to an old game is just how does the game feel. For context, I did play on the Enhanced Game of the Year edition. I did find later that this version does have quite a few issues, so more dedicated Borderlands 1 players tend to prefer the original, as well as the original just having better mod support. But regardless of version, I can safely say this game does feel really good still. If you fell in love with the game with this entry, you probably already know that the gun feel has just always been something that these games have done amazing. Shotguns, revolvers, and snipers have a super satisfying punch. Automatic guns like the repeaters, SMGs, and combat rifles have a satisfying stream of bullets that just melt health bars. I'll be honest, I didn't use rocket launchers much, but they did feel a little bit underwhelming when I did use them. Near the start of the game, I did notice something really weird with sniper rifles though. Sometimes when you'd be scoped just right on the mark, you could just straight up whiff shots, which honestly felt terrible and was frustrating. But as I leveled up Mordecai, he gained accuracy buffs, and my weapon proficiency went up. It mostly went away, but honestly, it's still a really weird choice not to have snipers be 100% accurate when they're scoped in. There's one last kind of weapon type in this game that I need to talk about, and that is Iridian weapons. And man, these weapons are just so cool. They have this weird alien-like design to them, resembling the Iridian structures in the Guardians that you'll find across the game. They all have this very weird but distinct feeling. Each of them have infinite ammo, but require a cooldown when used too much. But unfortunately, after the novelty wears off, they end up being pretty underwhelming. From a balance perspective, they were probably worried about making them too overpowered, so they decided to put a lot of limitations on them. I did use them a bit in my playthroughs, but really only found two that I would classify as useful. One acted a bit like a rocket launcher, which sent out a slow, huge orb that did pretty good damage at the time. This was useful for hiding behind cover, then peeking really quickly to try to hit a turret or some other stationary enemy. And then there was also one that acted a little bit like a shotgun that just did amazing shock damage, that I found really useful when I just wanted to melt a badass or alpha skag. But when the magazine was completely depleted, it just took so long for it to recharge. Most of the time I used them in niche situations or just at the start of a fight and then just didn't pull them out again. I would absolutely love to see these weapons come back in a later game, but with maybe ways to mitigate the slow cooldown rates or something. Maybe when a weapon gets fully depleted, allow the player to time something like a perfect reload to trigger the cooldown to start at an increased rate. I'm thinking something like Gears of War active reload mechanic. I just think that'd be a neat tweak to these. But overall, the guns just feel amazing and absolutely top-notch in this game. It's just so much fun just to unload magazines into mobs and bosses, and is a key to the series' replayability. It all started here, and honestly, I felt right at home with it. So let's talk about my playthroughs. For playthrough 1, I did it at a moderate pace. I did more side quests in the early game, mainly because I found I really needed to gain levels, but as I approached the end of the game, I was more focused on just doing story missions back to back. But for playthrough 2, I did complete every base game quest just to try to get the full experience, and honestly, I really enjoyed the campaign. The world of Pandora in this game is very bleak. It's just covered in sand, really just a sea of brown that people who grew up on Xbox 360 shooters know all too well. And I don't know if it's just nostalgia for that aesthetic, but I honestly really enjoyed exploring the world of this game. In a weird way, it felt cozy. I wish they gave you more things to do in the world though. Side quests in this game are pretty basic. Sometimes it's just go kill these enemies, pick up a thing and come back, or go shoot this tank or shoot poop off this wind turbine. There were some that required you to find weapon parts and would reward you with a unique gun, which were neat, but they kind of felt a bit tedious. There are two types of quests I really did enjoy though. There were a few that resulted in you spawning some sort of special enemy or boss and they'd drop unique loot. Those were fun and challenging. And then there were ones that required you to find echo logs, basically just audio recordings from various characters. While these quests were only Tannis, I believe, in the base game, it gave an interesting view into her character and into the world, which I found really enjoyable. Speaking of Tannis, I should probably talk about the story here. The story of Borderlands 1 is a bit basic, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's not great, but it served its purpose really well from a gameplay perspective. For the most part, the characters are largely forgettable out of a few just okay ones. Tannis for me added a bit of lore to the world, and finding her echo logs chronicling her studies of the vault and her surviving the planet were some of my more memorable moments. I enjoyed Marcus's quips here and there. It really just reminded me of a Borderlands version of Mr. Krabs, and honestly, I'm here for it. Then there's Claptrap, maybe more memorable for just being in your face about side quests every time you enter a new area. I do think he has a cool design in a game mostly covered in generic looking NPCs and bosses. I do think the DLCs helped this issue, but I'll dedicate a separate portion to that. Unfortunately, Commandant Steele as a main antagonist leaves a lot to be desired. She basically just chimes in here and there saying stuff like, oh, don't go after the vault, oh, that's Atlas property, we'll have to kill you, and basically nothing more. The best part of the game though is definitely the build-up and the mystery surrounding what the vault is. It's honestly perfect. Going through the game, you are constantly seeing different theories on what the vault is, how to open it, who's gonna open it. It really gets you hyped to see what's going to happen. For a while, you are facing a lot of similar enemies. There's quite a few different wildlife you can find on Pandora, but the majority of enemies is just various types of bandits. But eventually you'll start facing more and more Crimson Lance, the army of Atlas, and they are pretty tough enemies. Crimson Lance areas were just so much fun to go through though. They provided great experience and were just really fun to fight. But eventually, as both you and Steele get closer to the vault, it triggers the Guardians to start fighting the Lance as well. There's a point where you leave a story area and you just see a flood of Lance soldiers and Guardians fighting each other, and honestly, it just felt peak. It really feels like the world was beginning to clash into some sort of big war, which just added to the hype of approaching the vault. As you climb the Iridian Promontory and cut through Guardians who just drop massive amounts of XP, and as you just go through this one area, you're basically guaranteed to level up at least twice. You just feel really powerful, and then you finally reach the vault. If anyone has played Borderlands 1, they know exactly where this is going. As you enter, Steele uses the key, opens the vault, just to be anticlimactically killed by this weird monster. What follows is the Destroyer fight, a largely underwhelming and quick fight. Then the credits just roll. I don't know what I really expected out of the vault, and on paper, it being a jail for a world-ending alien sounds really cool, but the execution's just bad here. Steele getting killed off doesn't really do anything because you barely even know who this character is. The Destroyer itself was just a boring fight. You just unload bullets into it while weaving back and forth behind a pillar, and it's just easy and over in a flash. Really a underwhelming finale for what was pretty fun campaign. But this is a looter shooter, so what is there to do after the credits roll? Well, there's actually 4 pieces of DLC content that were made for the game, and the story DLCs were pretty fun. Because I completed both playthrough 1 and 2 before attempting the DLC, I did them in what was called playthrough 2.5, which is basically just a community term for after you turn in the final story quest. Everything begins to scale to your level, resulting in a much more difficult experience. Though this was only in effect for Zombie Island and Robot Revolution, as General Knox had its own level scaling, which was a bit weird, but it was still enjoyable. The writing for these DLCs felt much more similar to the writing of future games, taking itself a little less seriously, more humor, and just overall a fun time. Definitely were overall fun excursions after the main story. Zombie Island was a nice little adventure that was mostly a satire on a lot of tropes at that time. General Knox gave a bit more life to the Crimson Lance and fleshed out that faction a bit, and Robot Revolution gave us a lot of claptrap and callbacks to things we saw earlier in the game, resulting in a very satisfying boss rush at the end of that DLC's campaign. But one thing that was very apparent though, they took the complaints about the Destroyer fight to heart and made the DLC bosses way harder. Maybe a bit too much, but honestly, I found it more enjoyable and memorable with this difficulty spike. They didn't regain health after each death, so you really could just run forward and keep dying over and over again, but if you really got into it and tried to survive, they were pretty fun fights. But there were some quality of life issues that really got pushed to the forefront in these DLCs. First off, these DLCs just don't have fast travel for some reason. The only fast travel point is at the beginning of the DLC area, and then there's always some sort of run just to even get to the hub. As someone who primarily played in short bursts of 30 to 60 minutes, this became super tedious, as if I quit out, I'd spawn all the way back at the beginning if I booted the game back up. A really weird design choice, even if fast travel was a bit clunky in the game overall. But the second thing that was an issue in base game, but became even more apparent in the DLC, specifically General Knox, is the vehicles just suck in these games. If you turn too fast, they flip over. Oh, see that little rock? It just stops your car in its tracks. Knox DLC has these long roads of just mostly nothing that you need to take a car to get through, just to get anywhere in this DLC. And with DLCs not having fast travel, it just becomes really tedious. It's just a very clunky system that feels out of place. A few times in the game, you are heavily encouraged to engage in vehicle combat, since if you're outside a vehicle and you get run over, you just die instantly, never entering a fight for your life state. It makes certain spots in both the base game and the DLC force you into this vehicle combat, and it's just so slow and boring. This trend continued into later games, and I don't know why. It just sucks. But there is that fourth DLC that I was alluding to earlier, and that's Mad Moxie's Underdome. And it's probably best just to skip it. It's a bland arena experience. It's just boring and long, and it's a long grind for basically no reward. Most players just skip it, or just go to the area to use the bank that was introduced there. And I agree with them, just skip this DLC. Honestly, surprised this never got reworked, because a arena combat endgame could be engaging. Throw a loot room at the end, make the encounters a little bit more interactive, and really you could have had a good piece of endgame content there, but unfortunately it just never happened. So what does the endgame of Borderlands 1 look like? It's really a mix of chest farming and killing Crawlmarax, which sounds underwhelming, and in some aspects it is, but I found myself really enjoying it. When looking for new gear, you'll most likely be doing one of two farms. You could do the General Knox Armory, or the Hyperion gift shop. The Knox Armory requires a glitch that allows you to fall through the floor before entering the armory, which allows you to loot the room without setting off the 3-minute timer that ends up blowing it up. Normally there are only a total of 3 times you can farm the armory, one at the end of the story DLC, and twice through side quests. Since the gear didn't scale to my level at the end of the DLC, I just blew it up for the first time, and then went back once I had the side quest Super Marcus sweep so I could farm it for some max level gear. But basically, you just run to the armory, you kill Knox, you glitch in, and you loot it. And if you never set off that timer, you can just keep doing it over and over again. There is one that's better if you're going for just legendaries and the enhanced edition, but if you are on the vanilla version of this game, this is the farm. It's easily the best way to get gear in vanilla Borderlands 1. Also, there are lance chests in there, so there's a chance for pearlescence as well. When I was gearing for Crawlmarax though, I did a different farm called the Hyperion gift shop, and this one's much easier and quicker. It was heavily buffed in the enhanced version. Basically, at the end of Robot Revolution DLC, you get access to the gift shop, which is just a room full of chests, no enemies to run through, relatively short run to get to it, basic, simple farm. But once you get some good gear, what do you do with it? Well, there is one raid boss in this game, and thankfully it's a good one. Cromarax the Invincible is a challenging fight that requires some top-notch gear, a solid understanding of elemental weaknesses, and precise aim. He can only be damaged by hitting his weak spots, which do blow up once they take too much damage, so a crawl kill requires you to hit each of these spots till they blow up. There are 4 shots in the joints of his arms, his eye, and then 1 on his back, which is usually the hardest one to hit since he's always trying to chase you, especially if you're playing in solo. He does some insane damage, but what adds an additional layer to this fight is that there's all these minions in their arena. There's a total of 3 different types, each having a different elemental weakness: an armored crawl worm that's weak to corrosive, and generally not too much of a threat as they are pretty slow and make for good enemies to pick yourself up with. Then there are the green craw worms that are weak to fire, and the craw maggots that are weak to shock. These last 2 can just charge you with some blistering speed and can easily take you down if you don't pay attention to them. This turns the fight into almost like an interesting resource management game. I found myself wanting to keep these minions low on life, so I could easily pick myself up when need be, but I also didn't want to leave too many around as they could easily overwhelm me while I try to line up my shots on craw. With their elemental weaknesses, you'll want to enter the fight with a pretty defined set of gear. One that can do big crit damage to take down Cromarax efficiently, then one for each element to take out those minions. Overall, a super challenging but rewarding fight, but you don't just fight this guy for the challenge. What do you get from them? Pearlescents are easily my favorite part of this game. It's a super low rarity, hard to grind piece of gear that's just so much fun to hunt. When looking at percentages, a typical pearl has about a 0.011% chance to drop from a lance chest and a 0.143 chance to drop from Cromarax. Both just really terrible drop rates. But that's kind of what makes farming them so addictive. Craw technically triggers drops multiple times from his loot pools, so I'm not entirely sure what the actual chance is per kill. The 0.143% could potentially be better, but regardless, the farm is a grind and I absolutely love it. And unlike in Borderlands 2, pearls are absolute powerhouses. They feel really satisfying to find and use. It's crazy just how many more hours of enjoyable content you can get just by adding some sort of chase items like this. The loot chase in this game is really fun. Though there is an additional type of weapon that only the craziest of people go for that I really find interesting, but I don't think personally I'll ever try to hunt for one, and that is a hybrid weapon. The way Borderlands generates gear is by having different parts that all piece together into a single gun. So each time an item drops, it gives you a random part that's available for that base item. In the sequel, the defining part has always been the barrel. The conference call will have the conference call barrel, the Norfleet will have the Norfleet barrel, etc. But in Borderlands 1, that's not the case. It can actually vary. Sometimes it's the barrel, the scope, the grip, or something else completely. But regardless, a hybrid is when a weapon has 2 of these, resulting in a total of 10 possible hybrids in the game, 9 if you're on the enhanced version. And they are guns that have 2 unique identifiers stacked, and some of these weapons are absolute powerhouses like the Nemesis Invader and the Reaver's Penetrator, though some of them are pretty lackluster like the TK Bulldog. I definitely think it's more interesting to talk about and think about them than actually trying to farm them. The chance of these spawning are so low, and some people don't even know how to calculate the drop chance, as this was an unintended mechanic. But they are there for you crazy ones. There's a great video by Cashew1405 that covers each hybrid in the game, and I'll link it down in the description if you're interested in learning more about them. Overall, I think Borderlands 1 has been an amazing experience, and I would absolutely recommend people to go back and play it, and just see where this series started. The guns of the first game feel absolutely amazing, and while it may be a bit janky from time to time, it is a cozy world to explore, with some really powerful and exciting low drop rate weapons. The little endgame content you have can be stretched pretty far if you are up for the grind. I have absolutely loved every minute of this game, and am super glad I decided to give this a deep dive, and can't wait to farm some more pearls. So I know that was a little bit of a different video than I normally do, but I'm more open to trying some different games. I had a really good experience playing through this game and writing the script. I think next I'm going to try out Last Epoch. That's a game a friend has been trying to get me to play for a while now, so I think I'm gonna do a in-depth review on that as well. But as always, just want to shout out the Discord that is linked down in the description below if you want to just play some games. We play a lot of fighting games or just hang out in voice chat here and there. Go check out that Discord down below. And as always, if you like this type of content, make sure to like and subscribe, and see you next time.